All right. I doubt we'll get much of a live viewing because it's basically like 5 a.m. where we're from. But yeah, let's talk about persuasion. Let's talk about influence. Let's talk about your ability, or should we say inability, to get the most out of situations and get the most out of people. I wanted to talk about this topic for a long time. Well, one, because it's been asked in several ways and different, in different sort of like interpretative manners. But I think the root of it all is, the same. Um, there's a desire in people to gain a sort of confidence or a competence in affecting their lives in a practical sense. And I realize this, and even the content that I post, most of the content that gets the most reposts and likes and so on and so forth are surprisingly the more basic, practical ones. So I understand that we live in an era where practicality and practical integration of knowledge is very valued. I'm not against it, so to speak, as long as the depths and the spiritual complexities of and the lessons of these, practical wisdoms and knowledge is not kicked to the curb, so to speak. We must understand um, that practicality alone, without context of the why, um, can be a double-edged blade, right? Um, it can make you or it can unmake you, depending on how you apply said knowledge to life. And now, the greatest of creators, I don't like calling anyone a magician. Everyone is a magician. They're, by their own right. Um, but the most powerful of creators are able to take relatively abstract and mystified concepts and ground them in reality and then ground them into, well, practical usage, right? This is the difference between, let's say, the illusionist and the magician. And now the next question is a question of ethics, right? So let's say these topics that we are going to talk about today, um, there always comes up the conversation of ethics. But today, for the sake of learning and for the sake of being non-disruptive to, the art or the arts, um, let's put ethics aside. And I know it's strange coming from me to say that because I always come with disclaimers and warnings and doomsaying, blah, blah, blah. But let's put ethics aside for a moment just to bask in the glorious graces of um, words of power. Well, what is a word of power? Okay, let's talk on that first. Now, there is such a thing as affecting others. Let's agree on that basic idea that all of us at all times are very open to being affected by others, and others are very open to being affected by us. This is why humans naturally are more or less terrified of one another because each of us, are open channels, so to speak, right? Other people have the luxury of being able to plant seeds of ideas into our heads and in our imaginations, right? We all know this is true, of course. And this terrifies us to a degree, even the ones who think they don't care, it doesn't affect them, or whatever, whatever. You can only cover your ears for so long. And there is also such a thing as human curiosity. And human curiosity is something that is divinely stupid, right? will still want to hear something that you know you should not be hearing, right? And now, because of these prerequisite factors that exist, it's very simple for, let's say, me to tell you, quick, imagine a jumping unicorn. Imagine it. It's a unicorn. It's galloping on a green field somewhere. It's very hard to resist the urge to do exactly as you're told. So, what the mind does is, well, what it is told. And now, when the mind does something that it is told, there's two modalities, or let's say three, but for the sake of simplicity, let's keep it dualistic. So there's two modalities, right, that occur straight after. One is acceptance of the imagery if you find it tolerable, and the other is the more interesting one, which is resistance, right? So if you find the imagery that was so brutally and forcefully shoved into your mind space, if you find it intolerable, then you will shush it, right? That you will shoo it away. Now there's there's a lot of hidden meanings and a lot of secrets to learn from this process. Well, one, primarily, the primary lesson of all this is that we are all vulnerable to one another. That's the primary lesson. And what happens during these cases, right, when you have ideas shoved in your head, regardless of which modality you go for, so regardless of whether you decide to tolerate the imagery that was put in your head or to resist the imagery that was put in your head, the effect, the accumulative effect of such a process is the draining of energy. It exhausts you, it tires the mind, right? So now we've just established an arena where each and every one of us can effectively affect the other by tiring out their mind and draining their will through the forceful application of involuntary imagery within their mindscape. Now, this is a terrible thing, is it not? Whether you resist or whether you accept it, you still have to give a little bit of energy um, to do so, right? Now, if there was anything um, that you could call a psychic grip, would it not be something along these lines, right? That's how I see it. I see that as a psychic grip, right? Now, if I can say a word into being, and the effects of me saying that word are somehow draining and exhausting for your mind and your mental state, I would say that's a sort of a psychic grip. You realize where we're going with this conversation now, I hope. You realize sort of like the immensity of the technique, right? But we're just at the basics. So, okay, we've established that there is such a thing as a psychic grip. We've established that there is such a thing as involuntary engagement with the psychic grip. Now, the second element, the second layer of this lesson today, we're going to go through. The second layer is of trance and hypnotic application. So let's say we've established the existence of the psychic grip, what we call the psychic grip, which is the involuntary response of the mind to painted imagery and outer stimuli. And the entrancing effect is important and interesting in a sense where um, it cannot occur without the voluntary acceptance of the person being entranced. So, what if I told you that if you go to your neighborhood supermarket and you ask me, Is there a perfect chronology of words that I could say to the cashier that would end up in them giving me a free chocolate bar? What would I answer you? I would answer you, yes, of course. Well, if we live in a world of infinite possibilities, one such, you know, how to say, outcropping of this infinite possibility is a conversation you're having with the cashier at the supermarket, and then the cashier allowing you to take whatever you want from there. Now, this becomes a much more specific and niche study now. Sort of like the meditative purpose of such a thing is to then become aware of what these words actually are. Well, okay, like what are the words possibly that one could say to a cashier at the supermarket to have the cashier act against their nature and in their seemingly good faith to allow you to take whatever you want from the supermarket for free? Now, I imagine this would be easier if you had a gun with you, but you don't. All you have is your silver tongue. You, you guys understand where I'm going with this? You know, you feel the energy we're trying to facilitate, right? You feel it? Well, I know you do. I know you do. Now, follow along with this logic. If there is always a perfect set of words, is it worth saying anything else? If I want a girl that I like to become enamored with me and fall in love with me, and if the status quo is that there is a perfect set of words and utterances that I can employ to achieve that effect, does my life become about finding what those perfect words and intonations and movements and mannerisms are? You can imagine how a task like that would be immensely difficult and probably impossible to achieve. It's impossible for us to muster the to become so observant, right? To be able to conceptualize these sorts of power words, right? The sort of powerful verbiage to achieve this sort of effect. That is why the sister form of these words of power is suggestion. The idea that what you are saying is imperfect, but what you are suggesting is not. It's the same thing I'm doing to you right now, whether you're aware of it or not. I'm suggesting ideas to you. See, I'm not making any conclusions, very strong conclusions. I'm asking you all the time, well, my dearest friends, do you understand where we're going with this conversation? Are you persuaded yet? Blah, blah. Um, Suggestion is the fundament of hypnosis and trance. And it's far easier to work with a willing partner, someone who is willing to engage with suggestive ideas, than someone who is resistance based and resistant to the imagery that you offer up, unless the imagery is something they like. Most of the times that will not be true, right? Now, again, we've put ethics aside. We don't care about the conversation that would unfold if this were a standard conversation in an ethical room. The conversation would take the turn of, well, is that really manipulative? We don't care about that for now. For the sake of learning, we will speak on ethics later. But understand this: as power words exist, right? As the perfect conversation exists, so does something called a mesmeric state. And a mesmeric state is the means through which you incite agreeableness within the person you are communicating with. And it makes them open to suggestion. You put the emotional weight behind the idea that they must listen very carefully and cautiously weigh the meaning and complexity and the depth of your language and the ideas that you are offering to them. And you will see the effects of this sort of speak, the effects of this sort of speak in their eyes when you achieve this effect, because their awareness, wherever it is, and most people's awarenesses are somewhere else, they're never in the present moment, right? That's why they're on autopilot. Now, if you had the magical ability to summon up the full awareness of of another human being at will on demand, you've already become a very impressive person to them and to yourself. So what is the magic word? Well, depends on the place, depends on the person, depends on a lot of small variables. Now, your conscious computer is not equipped to handle the computing of these complex variables. But do you know what is equipped to handle it? Your intuitive side, the secret supercomputer that has been implanted in your psyche since times immemorial. And then there is the practical and the physical element of actually uttering the words that come to your mind. And that, my friends, is augmented and enhanced by belief. Belief that it will come out just right. When you speak to a person directly, when they truly feel your words reverberate in their body, when you offer up imagery to them that vibrates and resonates within their electromagnetic fields, within the waters of life that gush through their veins. This is why I would call it such communication. I would call it a form of blood speak. And if you understand the base ideas that we explored just now, you will come to understand that there are always the right words to say, but you will also understand that that is an unimaginably difficult task for a single mind. But the fact of that existing gives us the opportunity to make our constituents suggestive and open to hearing our ideas. The art of unfolding the other person the art of the psychic grip, the art of garnering attention, right, is in the simple idea of choice and voluntary engagement. Again, you might be cussing someone out and causing no resistance whatsoever in that person. They are fully open to the imagery you offer them. Sometimes I'll walk into a shop or something and I'll talk to the clerk or the store clerk or whoever. And sometimes I'll walk into a restaurant, I'll talk to people there. I like to talk to people a lot, very casually, right? Just to get that little ticklish feeling, right? Of having engaged with another soul on a human level, having broken the monotony of their days, having been a sort of an outlier in their experiences of the trivial and the mundane, right? Most people live very trivial and mundane lives. Just that fact alone, the strangeness of that, is enough for that suggestive channel to open. Well, you can make the assumption, let's say if you go to a restaurant and sit at a table and, the person is just doing their job on autopilot, what are some words that you can say that open up a suggestive state in that person, right? Well, the first thing you do, of course, is you have to up the ante. You have to make it about something. You have to have them invest in the conversation on an emotional level. Now, if you've engaged someone in a conversation on an emotional level, you've gained that psychic grip. So I can tell them, you know, I'll ask you for your name and you'll tell me your name. And then I'll tell you, well, let's say your name is, I don't know, Maria. And I'll tell you, well, Maria, I have a very strong intuitive feeling that you're going to tell me exactly what the best items on this menu, you know, are. And again, they can either accept that or they can resist it. But people usually, when you give them an image of their competence, right, they have an innate desire to prove that competence to themselves. Thusly, the effect is achieved 99% of the times. It really is that simple. And then she'll tell me, well, we have this and this and this on our menu. Like, these are all really good items. And then I'll tell them, okay, but which one is fresh? You have inside info. You're a knowledgeable person. You're here day and night. I'm sure you see all kinds of things. I've just been here for 10 minutes. And you lock eyes with that freak, right? You lock eyes with the animal. That is where the exchange of the common essence occurs. The alchemization of the moment. When you look at someone in the eyes, both awarenesses are forced. They're summoned up into the current moment. They're not elsewhere anymore. When you look someone in the eyes, it's 100% to 100%. You understand? That is why hypnosis, for the most part, has to do with working with the senses, but most hypnosis, the most powerful hypnosis, has to do with the eyes or the closing of the eye. Now, how that conversation usually, you know, dissolves is I get the information I need. They get the dopamine release from having proven their competence to themselves, right? The other person. And in that sense, when you look at human communication, social dynamics, this is where we return to ethics. It's all really one big stage of domination. It's one big arena. The idea of the psychic grip affecting the other, we all affect one another to a degree on a surface level. The idea here is how well intentioned you can be. We've all established that we all affect and manipulate the imagery of the other. But how well intentioned can you be? That's the real question. That's the real ethical question. Let's not pretend that us as human beings do not manipulate one another at all times, because we do. There is no other way to communicate. This is why verbal communication is a lesser form of communication, whereas telepathic communication is the higher form. Why is it a lesser form? Because it allows man to influence and affect the other who is constantly vulnerable, unless the other practices incredible amounts of self discipline, but they will still be energy drained. You understand what I'm saying? Like they will still be challenged when new imagery is presented, whether you like it or not. Now, I can tell you things and I can put images in your head. People think, well, I'm impervious to propaganda. You're impervious to propaganda? Imagine George W. Bush shooting himself in the face right now. His blood splattering all across the fucking walls. He's sitting in a chair. His head is hunched over. Isn't it visceral and vivid? The blood, the scene, however it makes you feel. Can you control imagining it? No. Can you control how it makes you feel? No. You can only control the modality of how you react. Huh? And even that takes willpower. Now, when it comes to power and persuasion, we have to be honest with ourselves. If we are using verbal means of communicating, not thought forms, but verbal means of communication, we immorally affect the other at all times. Parents to their children, children to their parents, kids to other kids, teenagers to other teenagers, adults to other adults, politicians to other politicians. We are a very vulnerable, fragile minded species. We are all open. But there are some, in a sacral sense, in an emotional and empathetic sense, who are open fully. And what I mean by this is they can be impressed upon to a significant degree. And they are the most vulnerable, yet the strongest. This is how these things balance, you know, itself out. If I am a strong receiver of your energy, right? Let's say if my sacral heart is open, then I will be significantly affected by whatever you say. My imaginative function is going to be very strong. My ability to relate and emphasize with whatever imagery you give me will be enhanced, which it is. But at the same time, you'd be giving me a lot of juice to work with. because I feel what you feel. It's not telepathic, it's telempathic. And now, if I can relate on an emotional level to whatever you give me to such degree that is close to mimicry, then I know exactly how you're feeling. And if I know exactly how you're feeling, I probably also know what you're thinking, probably right now. So this is how it's balanced out. The ones who are the most vulnerable are also the most powerful. Now you understand how this interplay sometimes becomes toxic, right? The ones who are energetically the most vulnerable and weakest, ideas can be planted in their head and mind, are also the strongest at achieving that effect with others. So yes, if you're in the business of persuasion, by all means, understand that there are three layers to this game. The first layer is the layer of perfection. Yes, there's a perfect chronology and hierarchy of words and intonations and sounds that you can make to get whatever you want out of a situation. And that exists at all times because there's an infinite possibility of words and an infinite possibility of actions. That exists at all times. You can just go for it and attempt it, and once out of 150,000 times, you will get it right and you will get your intended results. The second one is the more formulaic and suggestive act of entrancing someone, or mesmerism, or animal magnetism, so to speak, right? That's the second layer of it, where you create a situation where you create some sort of emotional weight and emotional payoff, as we described in our example, where you purchase the person's agreeableness, right? And conformism to your ideas. And the third is what I would call bloodspeak, which is speaking from the intuitive heart. Now, if your intuition tells you to tell that other person something that might seem strange at first, but your intuition is strong and is telling you to do so, you should probably do it. Do you know why? Because it's the only means of verbal communication that is not by nature manipulative, because it is not inspired by any base desire, but something higher, something beyond that, something mystical, something abstract that they need to hear. That's why they say speak from your heart. If you are able to do so, if you are able to speak from a place of intuition or high intuition, all of this math will be done for you. That's the secret mechanism. You can't do the math, you can't find the perfect words. Okay. Can you attempt a manipulative trance like state? Can you make another person suggestive or open to suggestion, as we all can? Yes, to some degree you might. Maybe even to a very impressive or high degree. But will you be morally aligned with your ethics and values? Probably not. But can you engage in intuitive communication where you are just made to be a vessel of the information that needs to be passed on from you to this other person? Now, if you can do that, now you're eternally more impressive. You're very impressive. So we understand the three layers of persuasion and power, right? The first is mastery, which is very rarely achieved. The second is forceful, willful, the psychic grip, where we purchase a voluntary trance-like state from the person we're communicating with. And the third and the highest form of verbal communication is intuitive communication, where we communicate with the other with pure, well intentioned means and an intuitive guide on what they need to hear. And this is a funny experience too. Well, firstly, because you have to practice your intuition. And secondly, sometimes you'll end up, you know, in quite a few quirky situations because of it. But that's the price we pay for becoming a vessel of knowledge and wisdom for the other. Now, where is the practical side of all this? And I want to teach you a lesson here. If you are unable to derive practical examples, practical usage from this sort of knowledge, then you are probably not worthy of it by your own metrics and standards. I'm not here to chew it down for you so that you can swallow. You have to chew it down. You have to chew your own food. Now you have the idea and the concept and the example, but it is up to you in your mastery and your ability to discern, right? And to squeeze the wine or the juice out of the fruit, so to speak. You must apply your willpower to achieve that effect. When you understand these means of communication, right? When you really understand it, most people don't. You know, they'll hear this conversation, they'll just take it as some random mumbling or whatever because they're not ready for it. But when you truly, truly understand what I am trying to impart on you here, you will understand that your words will carry an incredible charge, incredible power. And if you are able to couple that with the intensity and the innocence of your gaze, then you're basically unstoppable. Lock those eyes in and speak from your heart. That is the secret of persuasion. Now, you can't do that over the internet, of course. That's why the internet is a very dark and shadowy place. It is very rare that a person can project their heart onto the internet. Text is, you know, you can't derive heart from text. It's removed. That is why prose and poetry are required. That is why flowery prose and beautiful prose is required to somehow communicate the heart and the intuitive element, the beauty of what's being said, without the locking of the eyes. This is why the internet is a shadow of the human social dynamics. That's why people find it so easy to be rude and dismissive and spiteful on the internet because it's easy, because they're removed from their most powerful means of communication, because they're removed from the direct intensity of the gaze, the surrender of that effect, right? there's a specific thing when I look at you that deep down I have a want or a desire to say. And sometimes it might be a strange thing, but I will still always say it. If you have a message for just about everyone, you're an interesting person, right? So yes, the shallow part of communication is very manipulative. Both of the first two layers are incredibly manipulative, and it's a power struggle. But the third one is an enigma. The third layer that overpowers the rest of any of these other layers. That is the enigma. That is a deep, innate knowing of what needs to be said at that specific moment in time and one's ability to actually execute those words. That is magic. That is the incantation. That is the spell that is ever shifting. So look at it like this again. The first layer that we explored is the achievement of the correct hierarchy or the chronology of words from a human logic. Now, if you had a supercomputer of logic and discernment, which would take an immense amount of energy and power and willpower and force, you could conclude what the right words are. And in the second sense, you have a sort of idea of what the right words are, but you never have the right words. So what you do is you engage in manipulative tactics to voluntarily persuade and voluntarily entrance the other person you're communicating with to become open to your imperfect suggestions. So while you have a perfect understanding of what your end goal and end result is, what you need it to be, you don't have the understanding of the efficiency of the words, the efficacy of the verbiage, the vernacular to achieve that effect. So what you do is you reverse engineering in their minds. You try to make them see, but first you have to make them open. You have to make them tolerant of your idea. Or you could just be an asshole and drain everyone's energy. This is what energy vampires do. They'll overload you with imagery and information and thought forms. They'll overload you with repetition. It's also a terrible thing because if you can exhaust someone long enough, then they become, you know, involuntarily ready to accept whatever information you give them, and after some point, they won't be able to imagine that anymore. They'll just be fed up with you. And number three, the third layer, of course, the most important layer is the computer working in from behind the scenes that you and I have, the intuitive mind, the intuitive computer that has already made these calculations. But again, your logical mind is unable to make these calculations because where your logical mind goes is usually not where the intuitive mind goes. The intuitive mind might give you some ridiculous word or a ridiculous act. But you're like, there's no way I'm doing that. There's no way I'm saying that. There's no way. Like, and now you've caused a resistance in yourself. But if you can actually do it, if you can actually practice it, you will find that the results are most of the times to your favor in the short term, and definitely all of the times in your favor in the long term. If you want to speak to a person's soul, You don't speak from a place of want and desire and transaction. You speak from the heart, the intuitive source. If you wish to manipulate others and dominate them with your intellect, then yes, you can do so, but your effect will rarely ever be achieved. And then it will cause anger in you, right? And it'll increase your ego and cause anger in you as well. You can never have the perfect words, but you can always have the perfect intention. And most of the times, the perfect words stem from the perfect intention. That's the secret. That's the secret of language and the secret of spells, the secret of speaking. You can either speak to the flesh, you can speak to the awareness, or you can speak to the soul. By being plain, you can speak to the animal, and if you wish to be subtle and unnoticeable, you speak to the animal. If you wish to be present and impressive and willful, you speak to the awareness. And through practicing the gaze, the locking of the gaze, the locking of the eyes, you will be able to do so. You will be able to summon up the awareness from any person, regardless of who they are. Y- they'll suck it up and summon it up in the present moment only by locking eyes. But there's an intuitive element to that too, of course. The eyes are a very complex thing. It's just one of its many dozens of functions. But you can achieve that. And number three, we all know what number three is at this point. We've talked about it several times now. Right? We just be repeating ourselves now. Think on it. I urge you to think on it. I urge you to speak from the heart. That's where the real power is. That's how you become really persuasive, actually persuasive. You speak from the heart. It might not be immediately visible, but over time, you'll see it. It's really important how we communicate with ourselves and with other people as well. Before we finish up, I'll tell you this. You will discover that most of the language you use is not even you, especially the fools who think they're beyond propagandizing and they're beyond influence and control, when their whole vocabulary, their whole vernacular, their whole system of verbiage and intonation is based on someone else or on someone else's culture or a word that someone uses or this word that society has made popular and mainstream. They'll say stuff like, "What's up, my guy?" What's cooking? Good looking, you know? And they think it's them being themselves. When in truth, they know very well deep down that they're not. They might swear a lot and cuss a lot. Can you find me a person who genuinely thinks they're, there's someone who swears and cusses a lot? Like, if you look deep down in your heart, is that you speaking or is that someone else? So if you've allowed someone else to influence you to such a degree, and then you'll come to me with a snarky little smile and tell me, "Well, I am so smart. I am beyond the influence of others. I'm not vulnerable. I can watch videos of people getting killed and tortured, and nothing phases me." You are as moronic as one could possibly be. It's not an offense, not a, you know, it's not a dig at you. It's possibly objective fact. Only a crazy person would say that. Your whole identity, your whole language, your whole every bit of your mannerisms is based on the preferences of someone else. So you are the symptom of someone else's persuasion. That's what you are. So it's important to understand that and differentiate what is truly ours and what is external. And you can't do that without the power of discernment. And you definitely can't do that if you like to imagine this make believe world where nothing affects you and nothing phases you. Everything affects you. You are vulnerable to these things. You are. Whether the doesn't matter what degree of the spectrum you're on. Everything affects everyone. That is the law of human communication. That is why this world is difficult. It's difficult to find compromise and diplomacy because everything we say affects everyone else who's listening. So when we say someone is fake, when we say someone is lost or confused, their energy is fragmented, they've given up parts of their true self and they've brought in a foreign alien force, right? An alien invader into their psyche upon which they've based their whole identity on. Ha ha, I'm the guy who swears a lot. I'm the guy who talks like this. I'm the guy who does this. Get it? So most of the times you're not really talking to the person, you're talking to the ego identity that is formed by the most basic survival instinct and self preservation possible. So, yes, you might talk to someone and you might get this feeling, and I'm sure everyone here has gotten it once or twice at least. You might get the feeling that you're not even talking to a real person. You're talking to a caricature of a person. You're talking to a caricature of this idea or ideology that they're subscribed to, and they've built this forward facing mask that they think is them. But in fact, it is not. It is just the layer of selfishness that appeals to them the most, that appeals to their insecurities the most, and their shortcomings and their fears and their base desires. So yes, most people you will talk to, they will be in a state of low energy. They will be very open. They will be very vulnerable. And their resistance also is going to be strong because they will be afraid of the things you tell them. But even they won't admit to themselves that they're afraid. For example, you can go to someone who's very nihilistic and hedonistic, and you can tell them, you know what, my friend, I think you're trying to escape from something. I think you're responsible for everything that happens to you in your life. And that terrifies them. It terrifies them because you remove their crutch and they need the crutch. They're addicted and obsessed with the crutch. They need the idea in their minds that there are some external forces that they can blame things on to victimize themselves. Oh, it's like it's these people or that people. It's the matrix that's coming after me, and no, 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 I'm a victim. I'm an eternal victim of because they know just how vulnerable they are. So they're going to rage against it with the full power and the full force of their will. And they're going to aggressively try to impress their ideas and their imagery onto you. This is a sign of fear and cowardice against the unknown. But you should also pity them in a sense, because you don't want to be sitting in their brains. You don't want to be in their minds 24/7. Trust me, you don't. And this is most people today. This is most people today, unfortunately. And then there are some, of course, with conscious awareness who can summon up their awareness and bring themselves into the moment and become receptive and have an open mind and learn, truly learn, and advance spiritually. And then you know, then are those on the final and the third layer who carry a sort of intuitive wisdom and intuitive knowing. And those are the ones you notice. Those are the ones that don't incite this challenge in you. Those are the ones who know exactly what and when to say and how to say it. They don't inspire this competition or competitiveness in you. Resist or tolerate. Conform or resist. Conform or resist. Conform or resist. That's where most people are stuck. And their energy is harvested this way so easily. You understand what I'm saying? Whatever information is given to them, conform or resist, conform or resist, and they can't make up their fucking minds because deep down they know that there's something more to this, but they don't have the know how and oftentimes the intellectual capacity to understand that something like that exists, something beyond that choice exists. That's why people love jumping to conclusions because they need to find the solution to the binary problem that they've been offered. They need to either assign a 1 or a 0. But deep down, of course, they know that the problem isn't that simple, right? It needs a lot more calculating. But they don't have enough willpower to calculate it on a formulaic sense, so they don't have the mastery or the expertise to do so. And they're also removed from their intuitive heart, right? Like they're removed from their intuitive source, so they cannot grasp the correct decision on an intuitive, on a spiritual layer. So all there is left is for them to work on the first layer. And the first layer is, do I conform or do I resist? And that is how, in the collective mind of humanity, in the collective mind of man, duality is created and maintained. If you can go beyond that duality, if you speak directly to awareness, directly to the source, the animating source behind the human body, the flesh and bones that you see, and how you connect with that force is through intentful gaze, through the locking of the eyes, you will have gained this ability, so to speak. So I understand you want to derive some sort of practical meaning and some sort of practical application or some sort of practical benefit or some sort of practical lead that you can get in your field of work or career or professional life or whatever from this. And I know that's why people love physiognomy as well. They want to derive these practical skills and these practical meanings, right? They want to be like, well, how do I fix my physiognomy? Like, how can I become more handsome and like more attractive and more beautiful? Shallow on the surface, it doesn't matter. If you're removed from the source of the wisdom, it literally will probably work against you. So yeah, I can give you a lot of advice about how to fix your physiognomy, how to do what to do with this muscle or that muscle and blah blah blah. But I will not. I don't want to. If I wanted to do that, you know, I would be on TikTok, right? And I would be farming engagement and hustling and bustling money from there like there's no tomorrow. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that because I don't want to live in a world filled with stupid, unaware people. It's just you know, a personal thing for me, right? That I have. It's a principled stance, right? I don't want to live in a world of shallow-minded people. So yes, I can give you some practical info. I'm like, well, okay, let's you know, make your face look better so you're more attractive, right? I get those messages so much. Like I probably have like 50,000 hidden followers that don't actually follow my account, but they seem to spam my DMs a lot, right? And people are both terrified and fascinated with their physiognomies. They're terrified and fascinated. It's incredible to see. And I get all these messages of like, hey man, here's a pic of my face. Can you like quickly just tell me like how do I become more irresistible to women? I'm like, you're thinking in the wrong terms. You're looking at the wrong arena. You're staring into the wrong mirrors. But I know that's more difficult to understand. And it's more difficult to work with because it's an abstract idea. It's an abstract concept. It's not something that's chewed up for you to immediately shove in your mouth and swallow. That's how you become ungrateful, right? But if you can practice discernment, then you become worthy of the knowledge. When you listen to a spaces and you derive something practical through your own means, through expending your own willpower, then there's achievement to that. You have truly learned something, you have intuited something, you have gained something by your own volition, right? You have, how to say, become a participant in your own knowledge. Now you participate in your own wisening, and that's sort of a cleansing on its own, right? It's a cleansing ritual on its own. And everything boils down to simple truths. Can I write a book about persuasive tactics and techniques that don't employ intuitive knowledge and sense? Yes. Can I make it 400 pages? Yes. And so can you. It's nothing impressive. Anyone can do it. Just gather information, do the research, spend, years working on it and write it. Well, I won't have to spend years researching it. I already have the goods, but you get the point. Yeah, we can make it. We can make it 400 pages. We can say, well, if you want to persuade this and this person, employ these manipulative techniques and use this sort of tone and do that and this and blah, blah, blah. Turn on your radio voice, boys and girls, if you want to be impressive and get people to follow you. Just speak from your fucking heart. It's that simple. Just learn to listen to your intuition. And when the words come, say them without hesitation, even if they sound a little bit ridiculous. See where they go, see what they lead you to. And over time, your intuition will become stronger and stronger. And you'll know what to say and when to say it and when not to say anything, even if you logically feel like you should. That's how you become a strong communicator. And that's how you can become a vessel for your higher self. If you get out of your own fucking way, if you can become a vessel for your highest self, then your highest self can act through you, through the compass of your intuition. But if you get in its way all the time, which is what most of us do, admittedly, you're going to end up with mixed results. And this is who I would call and refer to as a journeyman. And if you call someone who's an expert practitioner in their own mind of whatever formulaic art they've devised, and you call them a journeyman, it spites their ego. They hate it. They hate it. They can't take it. They can't live with it, right? They hate being called out on it. But it doesn't make it less true. If anything, it makes it more true. Speak directly to the person's soul. Speak to their blood. When you get angry, what do we say happens? Say your blood boils, right? It activates. Your awareness is brought into the body. It's fully here in the moment. The body is stimulated to whoosh and force the awareness into the present moment, right? By emotional input. Different emotions cause the awareness to go to different places and to different times and timelines. If you're grieving, where is your awareness? Is it in the present moment or is it in the past? It interplays between the two. If you're longing for something, if you're desiring something, where is your awareness? It is aggressively thrusted into the future. And even in an alternate future where you logically surmise that you will have not achieved what you so desire to achieve. So not only you travel in time in the future, but you also travel into a timeline in the future. Your awareness is exploring the timeline where you have desires and those desires are not met. Again, I'm going to repeat myself. Where does your awareness fly when you're experiencing the emotion of want and desire? It flies into the future, but not the current timeline, the objective timeline. It flies into a separate alternate timeline that you are giving power to through your awareness inhabiting it for the moment temporarily. It goes there and it sits there and it ponders and meditates on the idea of how it would feel and what it would feel like if your desires and wants and needs were not met, if they never happened. So you strengthen that place, you make it more dense. You understand? And that's how you create a portal to your own mind to then take that, to take a piece of that, right? And take it back with you in the present moment, in your current awareness, and make it real. So, yes, humans are portals. Humans are the very definition of portals. You came from a portal, which is the mother's womb where you were conceived. And then as you grow and mature and become an adult, you function as a portal. You are a portal of consciousness. You are a conscious being that was put in an unconscious world to make it conscious, to decide what happens to the matter in it. You were put into a realm of endless infinite potential, and it is your understanding of that world and your engagement with that world that decides how this potential is then expressed. So realize how powerful that is. And then you take and then you put billions of these billions of these creators, these little portals, and you put them all together in a boiling pot. That's where we are now, right? And everyone's little conjurings and summonings and so on and so forth, they all have to be facilitated because that is universal cosmic law. Everyone and everyone's desires have to be somewhat expressed and somewhat facilitated. Now, that can terrify you, which it shouldn't, or it can empower you. It can give you an understanding of just how much agency you have in your life. But you can't just fake these things into being. You can't become afraid of, oh, I'm afraid of thinking this or that. No, no, no. Thinking is just an exploratory element. It's an exploration of ideas. So exploring an idea has no real effect on the material. Now, exploring an idea alongside emotional, heavy, intense emotional input, ooh, that's a completely different thing. That's a completely different power and spell because the idea plus the emotional effect, now that will reflect on our bodies and on our physiognomies. It will reflect if it's done regularly over large periods of time. A single time, once or twice, very subtle, basically unnoticeable. But yeah, do it regularly, chronic. Yeah, becomes that. And then a true portal, let's say, a double vortex, is formed when there is the intensity of thought and awareness, then there is the emotional augmentation, the enhancing effect the emotional state gives. And then there is the performative, theatrical, ritualistic, physical action that follows. So you align those three things now. Oof. Now you're talking about really bringing something out of the ether and into the material. Now you're very intentful about getting this thing that's out there into where you are. And now action registers differently than thought and emotion. Action is the final signing of the contract. You understand? So if thought is just the exploratory element and emotional investment is engagement in the idea, right? It's the tolerating of the existence of this thing, right? It is bringing it into being in an ideological sense, in a philosophical sense, where it is not a physical material thing, but it can exist as an egregoric field of ideas, a collection of ideas and energies. So it can exist on a philosophical level or a theological level. But the performative act is the final signing of the contract. So if you think it, if you feel it, and then you allow yourself to act according to what you're thinking and feeling, whatever that is, could be positive, negative, whatever, however you wish to see it, then you're passing through three portals from 0 to 3, 3, 6, 6, 9, blah, blah. You know how it goes. You're jumping through three hoops, and three hoops is all you need to jump through to make something stick, to lock it in into being. It's a four-step march. So think on that, my friends. Think on that. If you want to support me, buy a reading, buy my stuff. Um, you don't have to, but if you will, I'll be happy about it. Follow my page, share and repost. That's another way you can support me. Bring this info to others who are looking to find it, which they will. Um, and now I'm gonna go and get some food. Well deserved. I hope you all have an amazing day. Please think of what we spoke about today, especially the ethics part, right? Dive deep into yourself, reflect on like where is your behavior and speaking manner, where is it being sourced from? Where is it coming from? Is that you? Is it something else? Or is it something in between? So, all right. Much love.